Hi, welcome everybody. I am Enfys Book, and here we are with our episode 2 of 4 Quick Cues, Book Talk with Enfys. I am Enfys, and it is lovely to see you here today, and extra lovely to have our guest here, Misha Magdalene, who is the author of Outside the Charmed Circle, which is this amazing book right here in my hand.
And I love that you've got a copy and I didn't think to grab one.
Well, I've got one here.
Well, and they're like right over here. So, I have no excuses. None.
So first I'll say what 4 Quick Cues is, because this is only episode 2. This is our live interview chat show where I ask pagan authors 4 quick questions determined by a roll of the dice. So there are 20 possible questions and 4 of them will get asked and we won't know until the dice rolls. So with me today, as I've said, is Tamsin Davis Langley, aka Misha Magdalene, pronouns she, her, they, them. And Tamsin is a multi-classed, multi-geek, multi-queer witch and sorceress with a degree in gender studies and an initiate of multiple lines of traditional witchcraft, including Anderson Fairy and Gardnerian Wicca, as well as a reckless dabbler in both modern ceremonial magic and grimoire goetica. Under her nom de plume of Misha Magdalene, she's the author of Outside the Charmed Circle, exploring gender and sexuality in magical practice, and from August of 2017 to January 2021, the similarly named blog Outside the Charmed Circle at Pathos. They've been blogging since 2001, negotiating the online world since 1987, playing Dungeons and Dragons since 1981, and listening to weird music since birth. I approve.
Yep.
A native of California, she spent several formative years in upstate South Carolina and now lives on occupied Duwamish territory in the Seattle area with their polymath wife, her precocious daughter, and 2 adorably destructive black kittens. What are the kittens named?
They are named Susuwatari and Makuro.
Oh,
or
I love
Susu
that.
and Maku. They're named after the little soot sprites in the Hayao Miyazaki movies, like My Neighbor Totoro.
Yeah. Oh, I love the soot sprite. They're so cute.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, shall we begin rolling? Should we figure out our first question?
Let's roll.
Big money, no whammies. All right, we start with question 4. What's a magical text you keep referring back to and why?
A magical text that I keep referring back to. That is an excellent question. By the way, I loved all of the questions that you listed out. I think they're really insightful. And this one, there are so many good answers to it. I would say one of the texts that I go back to again and again is Cora Anderson's slim little volume, 50 Years in the Fairy Tradition. I have read this book. I mean, it's literally 60 some odd pages long. It is an essay, essentially. And I have read it literally dozens of times. And you know that thing where people are like, every time you read the book, you find something different? Mm-hmm. This book isn't even 70 pages long, and every time I read it, I find something new in it. Whether that is because it is a magical text which is hiding things from me until I'm ready to read them, or because I'm a different person every time I read it, and I am bringing that different self to the text every time, I'll leave as an exercise for the reader. But it is marvelous. It is frustrating. It is hilarious. It is contrary, and it is quintessentially fairy. So there is my answer for number 4, 50 Years in the Fairy Tradition by Cora Anderson.
I love that. I love that there's a short text that you get so much out of every time you read it.
I frequently had people come to me and say, I want to learn more about fairy. What should I read? And it's like, well, if you were looking at Gardnerian craft, I'd say, go read Thorn Mooney's book, Traditional Wicca. It's fantastic, and it's like the perfect sort of introductory text for somebody who wants to know what Gardnerian craft is all about. But with fairy, it's like, A, there's not a whole lot of published material out there, and B, everybody's take on what fairy is going to be different. It's going to be unique and idiosyncratic and specific to them in great degree. So I always suggest, go back to as close to the source as you can get. So, start with Cora. Start
Makes
with what
sense.
Victor Anderson had to write.
I'm going to go slightly off book here, and this is a new
Go
show,
for it.
so I figure that's my prerogative. I'm going to ask a follow-up to that, which is, you and I are both passionate about music. Is there an
Oh,
album
yes.
you feel the same way about, where every time you go back, you get something new about it, out of it?
Oh, gosh, so many. The first few off the top of my head that I can pull out are Kate Bush, Hounds of Love is one of my all-time text albums. Prince and the Revolution, Purple Rain is one of my, it is one of my perfect albums. It's just amazing and beautiful and wonderful. Marillion, the English prog rock band Marillion, their album Misplaced Childhood is just such, it is such a stack of layers upon layers upon layers of meaning and emotion and instrumental prowess, and it's just breathtakingly incredible. And yeah, so there's three.
I love that. I'm going to have to come back to the recording and look all of those up, because I don't think I've ever listened to any of those entire albums. So I will have to educate myself more. Like, I've listened to a lot of Prince, but I haven't listened to specifically the album Purple Rain start to finish. So yeah.
That is absolutely, give it a listen start to finish. It is a ride. And
Excellent.
starting out with Let's Go Crazy and finishing on the title track Purple Rain is,
that's an arc.
Yeah, it is an experience. So yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right, let's roll number 2 and see what our next question will be. We get 12. Goodness. Okay, these are the same questions that got asked last week. I swear this is not a way to die. I swear it. So number 12, where do you like to write?
Wow, I like to write anywhere that I can be comfortable sitting for a long period of time and have enough ability to isolate myself from outside distractions without feeling completely isolated. So those are all sort of qualities of where I like to write, but it doesn't really tell you much about the actual locations. I would say about 40% of Outside the Charmed Circle was written in one of the 2 squishy comfy chairs or on a couch at a place called Soul Food Books in Redmond, Washington. It's a coffee shop and gift shop, and they sell tchotchkes and trinkets, but mostly it's coffee and light snacks. And I apparently endeared myself to the wait staff by showing up in the morning and camping out for somewhere between 4 and 7 hours a day, drinking coffee and buying sandwiches periodically and just tippy tapping away until I got the book finished. About another 10 to 15% was written at the Redmond branch of the King County Library System, literally 2 blocks north of Soul Food Books, just because occasionally I wanted a little change of scenery. But yeah, I like writing in public, not as an act of performance art or anything. I'm not Harlan Ellison, blessed be his memory. But I do like, well, so as a writer, this. Writing is a profoundly solitary act. It is an act of pushing the entire world away and bringing all of your attention and focus on expressing this set of ideas. And you kind of have to make the rest of the world shut up to do that. So I would sit there with my headphones and my laptop and 17 tabs of research open, but it was really nice to be able to pause for a few moments and take the headphones off and not even interact with the people around me, but to just be in a room knowing that there were other people around. So that it's like, okay, I'm alone in my own space, but I'm not alone. That, has gotten a lot harder since the pandemic came to town.
Mhm.
So yeah, kind of rough. But yeah, that's where I like to write.
I love that sort of weaving the balance between the solitary act and being around people, but not having to engage with those people, like having that
Right.
pressure off seems really nice.
Well, yeah, it is. One of the things that I've noticed in talking with people since the book came out is that people will sometimes have this impression of writing as being this sort of mystical activity that happens in a faraway land on the top of a mountain in a monastery or a temple or something, and it's this, pristine act of creation. And you bring forth this text of pure, perfect crystalline beauty. And it's like, no, this is, I remember specifically where I was when I wrote certain passages of Outside the Charmed Circle. I remember the feel of the vinyl cushions under my butt as I was, adjusting and reaching for my coffee and, scratching my head while I was looking at certain references and going, oh my God, Plato was a misogynist, wasn't he? Just so bad.
Oh,
And,
just a
things like
tad.
that. Just a little.
bit.
Just an inch bit. But yeah, it's, one of the things that I like to stress to people when they're like, so how did you write the book? It's like, this isn't, this is not some rarefied cultural or, some like cultured thing that only a certain elite can do. It is a privilege to have the time and energy and ability to be able to do this. But I underscore and stress that anybody can write a book if they are so moved, if they have the time, the privilege of the time to sit down and put one word after the other. This is not, creation is magic, but it is not a magic that is unique to an elite class. Anybody can do magic, anybody can cook, anybody can write. Whether or
Absolutely. And
not
even
it's, yeah, and whether or not it's good, quote unquote, is a different argument. But
yeah.
yeah, I guess I have just enough punk rock in me to be like, you don't need writing classes. You just, 3 chords in the truth, man.
Heck yeah. One of the things I like to say about that is make beautiful garbage. Like your
Yes,
audience is you when you first write something, and maybe forever that the audience is you. So make something you like and then see if other people like it. But it's important
absolutely,
that you like it first.
absolutely. My first and most important audience is myself, and if I don't believe in what I'm writing, then I need to stop writing it and do something else. Whether that's write something else or, go make a spaghetti sauce or, fold laundry.
A punk rock spaghetti sauce and punk rock laundry.
Totally.
Yes.
Absolutely. With safety pins.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Totally.
All right.
Totally.
We're gonna have a queer's agreement here that if this is another question I asked last time, I'm going to re-roll. Okay. So
I'm okay with that.
I want to make sure we get a variety here. All
Yes.
right. Yes, it's a new one. Okay. 11.
Awesome. Awesome.
How did you get started writing? Perfect segue from the previous question. I did not fake that. It really is an 11 here.
um, so wow, how did I get started writing? I don't know. Just out of a profound need to, I have no mouth and I must state my opinion. I got started writing at a very early age. And, a lot of what I was writing was kind of sing-songy song lyrics and poetry and just having fun with stuff like that. And I didn't really take it into my head that I could put words together to create longer form things until I was probably 10 or 11, and I started thinking, I read a bunch of books by fantasy authors and science fiction authors and people like that. And maybe I could do something like that. And so I started, trying to write little short stories, and had greater or lesser success at ever finishing anything. And then as I got a little older, teenager, I started reading more nonfiction. And specifically, I started reading two things that really set my brain on fire. I started reading pagan, magical, occult texts that brought home to me this idea that there were people out there who saw the world either in ways similar to how I saw it, or in ways that I had never experienced before, and that were profoundly exciting and interesting and just opened up whole new horizons for me. And I started reading books of critical writing, like specifically music criticism. Um, there was, I should say, a writer by the name of Lester Bangs, music critic, essayist, kind of a massively problematic individual in many ways, but also one of the most incendiary writers and pundits on the subject of music and really art out there. And the library that I worked at as a teenager had a copy of his collected works. Psychotic Reactions and Carburetor Dung was the name of the book, which gives you kind of a sense of what his aesthetic was like. And he did things with language that I didn't know were legal. And reading his writing was like a lightning bolt to the back of my head. And I just went, oh my God, you can write things like that. You can say things like that. And people will not only read it, but they'll have reactions to it, and it will spark dialogue and conversation and, probably a few harsh arguments. Who knows? But after reading Lester Bangs and other critics, but he's the one that, was really sort of at the top of my list, I had this realization of, wow, I could do that. I can write about things in a real and visceral and honest and raw and unfiltered way. I mean, again, very punk rock. And, as a bonus, having the example of people like Lester Bangs and other writers of that era, I don't have to get hooked on heroin to do it.
A perk.
It is a perk. It is a perk. Because, I have friends and loved ones who've been down that road, and, some of whom mercifully, blessedly, have come through it and come out the other side and are healthy and happy and wonderful people. And some of whom were not as graced. So, there is, I think, this myth of the tortured artist that we sell ourselves as a way of setting artists apart from the rest of the masses. And I think it's a really unhealthy and unhelpful myth. And reading people like Lester Bangs and going, wow, I want to be able to do stuff like he did. He had a really sad life in a lot of ways. And, there, but for the grace of the gods, go any of us. So I always try to be really careful in saying, yeah, this author, this writer was amazing and wonderful, and he had such a tortured life, but he made such great art. It's like, no, he made great art in spite of the fact that he was tortured.
Yeah, that's an important distinction for sure.
It is. Wow, that was a really dark, heavy note to end on.
Hey, I'm here for it. I love that this is all fairly off the cuff and unscripted, and I also just really enjoy talking to you. So it's all good.
Likewise.
Yeah. So,
Always a
all right,
pleasure.
last cue. Let's see what we
Oh,
come up with
okay.
here. All right. Aha! You're gonna love this one. Number 6.
All right.
If
Okay.
you had a megaphone to broadcast a one-sentence message about queer magic to the entire world, what would it be?
You already know what my answer is.
I know, because I interviewed you a couple years ago and got the answer to this question, but I can't wait for other people to hear it now.
The message is, everything you love is queer. Deal with it. There it is. Everything you love is queer, semicolon. Deal with it. Or, I could do my best John Waters impression with the imaginary cigarette. Everything you love is queer. Deal with it. But yeah, one of the central themes of Outside the Charmed Circle, honestly, the central theme, the thesis of the book, if you will, is that paganism, polytheism, occultism, magic, all of this weird stuff that we do is fundamentally at odds with the overculture in which we are all ensconced. I go to some length to suggest we queer spirituality in the same way that gay and lesbian and bisexual and asexual and pansexual people queer sexuality, in the way that people who are trans, non-binary, genderqueer, gender non-conforming are queering gender. Those of us who are engaging in the sort of DIY spirituality and hands-on imposition of will on the internal and external universe are queering spirituality. We're queering religion. We are making of what's out there something new and exciting and unique and our own. We are creating something that speaks to the needs we have in the moment. And that in and of itself would make what we do as pagans and polytheists and witches and magicians queer AF. But there's the other side of that as well, which is that queer people have been part of these movements and schools and traditions of practice and belief as long as these traditions and lineages and schools and streams of practice have existed. Queer people, however we're defining that term, have always been here. They have always been with us. They are intrinsically a part of our myths, whatever culture we are in. You scratch the story hard enough and you're going to find queerness lurking under the hastily slapped up coat of paint that people put over it to try and pretend that, oh no, really, they were just roommates, or they were just best friends.
They were roommates.
And they were roommates, right? Yeah, everything we do has queerness woven through it. And watching people struggle to deny that would be laughable if it were not so intensely harmful. Not just to queer people, though, of course, that is one of my central concerns. When we go to these lengths to deny the queerness in our practice, in our myth cycles, in all this stuff we do, we are cutting ourselves off from so much depth of understanding and so much resonance with all of these areas, all of these aspects of the human experience, all to reinforce a set of assumptions about how people actually work that, as it turns out, aren't true. Or they're true for this much of the population, but you're talking about, you know, a whole lot more people than that. So yeah,
Absolutely.
everything you love is queer. Deal with it.
I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the things I really loved about your book, and how it was incredibly, like, on the one hand, that concept isn't completely new to me, but having it
Right.
crystallized in the way you did in the book, with all the different sections on things like consent in magic, and like all the different ways we interweave and should interweave more queer cultural touchstones into our magical practice, not just to invite more people in and make more people feel affirmed and present in their magic, but also to deepen everybody's magical practice. It really is
Yeah.
a phenomenal, fantastic book that I cannot recommend enough, seriously.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So,
That means the world to me. That you, it means so much to me that you and so many other people have found something of value and meaning in the book, because it was very much a labor of love, and it is very much the book that I wish someone had put in my hands when I was 15 years old, and you know, struggling with trying to find other people who felt the same way I did about, you know, spirits and gods and magic, but also, you know, sexuality and gender and relationships. And these things all seem like they're related in some ways, but nobody will talk about that. And so I wrote a book that would say some of those things to people today. And I am overjoyed that at least some of that seems to be coming through. So thank you so much.
absolutely. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to drop some links into the chat on Facebook. Folks on Facebook, you are
Linkage.
welcome to ask questions, and if they come in quick enough, I will ask Tamsin your questions. But first, let me get those links over into Facebook and see if Facebook's going to behave this time, because last time it did not actually show me the questions that came in. So I'm hoping it does this
Zoinks.
time. So we only missed one, but still, I
Okay.
was sad that we missed one. So let me see. I am checking, because right now, of course, it is opening very slowly, just
Of
to make my
course.
life a little more interesting. So while I sort of juggle with that, why don't you talk a little bit more about the book, which of course we were just talking about, but maybe where people
Oh,
can
sure.
find it, any kind of details you want to share about it, and then we'll talk about what's coming up next on this little show.
That sounds great. So, Outside the Charmed Circle, Exploring Gender and Sexuality in Magical Practice is a book that I wrote, which was published by Llewellyn in January of 2020. So, just over 2 years ago. My little baby book is 2. And it is, well, very much about what the subtitle would lead you to believe: gender, sexuality, magic. I talk a lot about practicing as a pagan, as a polytheist, as an occultist, and how that ties into one's lived experience of gender and sexuality and embodiment. I spend a lot of time trying to ask and then answer some of what I think are harder questions about the ways that our communities of practice engage with questions of power, especially as relate to things like sexuality and gender. There are 2 chapters in the book about consent. One about consent as we interact in community with one another as human beings, and one about consent as we interact with non-corporeal entities, gods and spirits, things like that. And I spend an awful lot of time, as I liked to joke while I was writing the book, arguing with dead white guys. So I, wound up, one of my favorite stories from after I'd written the first draft of the book, I was in a conversation with my editor at Llewellyn, Heather Green, who is wonderful and just a lovely human being.
I love Heather.
And
she's awesome.
Heather's great. And, Heather was talking to me about some of the edits that she wanted to see. And she was like, now, Misha, because, she was referring to me by my pen name, Misha Magdalene. She was like, so Misha, you can't call Aleister Crowley a jerk face. And I said, well, okay, but Heather, in the original, I called him an asshole. And then she busted up laughing. I fell over laughing, and we just had a great time. But yeah, so
I love that.
So I spent a fair bit of time, just having a little bit of fun with some of the stuffier figures in our shared cultural, spiritual lineage.
Awesome.
And
well,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Continue if you're.
Oh no, I mean, I could ramble on about this endlessly. I wrote a 200.
It's one of the reasons you're on the show. Yeah.
Right. I just didn't want to ramble on at length if you had the question that you were going to.
No, all good. So what I've done is
Okay.
I've dropped into, we don't have any audience questions that I'm able to see. Unfortunately, Facebook is being a bit of a pill, but your friend Jamie Elford says, yay and hi,
Yay.
Misha. So
hi, Jamie. I adore Jamie. Jamie is one of my pals and the author of a fantastic book on the Tarot, which I believe is called Tarot for Your Life. I'm going to just look that up real quick. Oh, Tarot Inspired Life is the title of her book.
that sounds fantastic.
No, she's great and awesome and wonderful. And I like to take every opportunity I can to shout out the people who are writing amazing work that I think would be useful and enriching for other people. And Jamie's book is absolutely on my short list of tarot books that I recommend to people.
Excellent.
And
yeah. Well, that's great. So, since we don't have any other questions, we will proceed to the outro here. But one thing I want to tell folks is, now that I am convinced this format actually will work and be a thing, I went ahead and booked more people to be on this show, and they said
more
yes,
people.
Which was great. So coming up, here's our lineup for the next couple of shows. February 16th, I have the pleasure of talking to Ivo Dominguez Jr., which is going to be fabulous. And then March 2nd, Ivana Burrow, who I'm super psyched to talk to about
That's great.
Non-binary paganism, breaking the binary in Wicca, all that kind of great stuff. So tune in for the full list of upcoming shows. Check out majorarqueerna.com. There is an audio and video section, and that's where I'm listing all the dates for everyone who is confirmed at this point, because there are several more, but I'm not going to read them all out loud right now. So this should be happening every 2 weeks-ish, I think, for, as long as there are still authors. And at least the people I've been talking to indicate I'm not going to run out of authors. So, it's going to be great. So I'm glad you were able to get in on the ground floor, Tams, and be one of my first interviews.
So am I.
This has been a ton of fun. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to quickly share my screen and do what I was trying to do before that didn't work out quite as well. But to say thank you so much for joining. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your day, wherever this finds you. And we will see you later as soon as I can find how to stop broadcasting to Facebook. I had it at the fingertips and there's stop recording, but there's no, oh, there we go, stop live stream. I'm still learning as we go. Thank you all for your patience with me and have a
Bye.
great rest of your day.